This story is titled, Mom and Stepdad Threatened to Cut Me Off If I Didn't Make His Son Partner. I stopped paying their mortgage and car, now they're begging for forgiveness. Hey Reddit, I'm a 45-year-old man and I need to get this off my chest. What I'm about to share has been weighing on me for some time now, and I think writing it all down might help me process everything that's happened. Some background first. I grew up in probably the worst situation you can imagine. I'm not trying to get pity points here. Just need you to understand where this whole mess started. My mom had me when she was literally 15 years old. Yeah, you read that right. My dad was a total piece of garbage who ran the second he found out she was pregnant. I never met him, don't even know his name, and honestly, I don't care. My mom's parents were these super religious types who cared more about what people at church would think than about their own daughter. They kicked her out when they found out she was pregnant. Real Christian of them, right? So there we were, a teenage girl and her baby with nowhere to go. We lived in these absolute dump apartments when I was growing up. The kind of places where even the roaches look at you funny. We moved around constantly because we couldn't make rent. Sometimes we'd stay with mom's friends, but most of them were just as bad off as we were. There were times we didn't have heat in winter. I remember sleeping in all my clothes with 3 blankets piled on top and still being cold. Electricity would get cut off a lot too. Have you ever tried doing homework by candlelight? It's not fun, let me tell you. My mom worked whatever job she could get, but who's going to hire a teenage dropout with a kid? She mostly did waitressing, cleaning houses, that kind of stuff. Sometimes she'd have 2 or 3 jobs at once, but it was never enough. We were on food stamps, and they don't last the whole month, you know. The last week of every month was always packet noodles or nothing at all. When I was about 9, this guy Tommy started coming around. Mom met him at the diner where she worked. Looking back now, I can see what a total loser he was, but I guess Mom was just desperate for someone to help out. He moved in with us maybe a month after they met, and that's when things got even worse. Tommy was one of those guys who acted all nice at first, then showed his real self once he was moved in. He'd push Mom around, not like full-on hitting, at least not that I saw, but lots of grabbing her arm, shoving her into walls, that kind of stuff. When I tried standing up for her, stupid kid thinking I could do anything. He'd get in my face, telling me he'd teach me some respect if I didn't shut up. The worst part was how he'd take Mom's money. She'd cash her checks, and he'd be right there with his hand out, saying it was for rent and bills. But somehow the rent was always late anyway, and he always had money for himself. I'd see him downtown sometimes buying stuff or hanging out, while we barely had rice and beans at home. This went on for like 3 years, and I still get mad thinking about it. Mom would make excuses for Tommy, saying he was trying his best or that things were tough for everyone. Then one day, he just didn't come home. We found out later he had moved in with some other woman he'd been seeing. Mom was a mess for a while after that, but honestly, it was better with him gone. We were still poor, like properly poor. But at least the money Mom made actually went to rent and food instead of whatever Tommy wanted. She dated other guys after him, but none stayed around too long. Probably because we had literally nothing, and once they figured that out, they'd disappear. I started noticing around 12 or 13 how other kids lived. Like, really noticing. They had actual houses with their own rooms. They got new clothes instead of stuff from thrift shops that never quite fit right. They could buy lunch at school, while I was on the free lunch program, which was embarrassing as fuck, by the way, because everyone knows when you're on free lunch. That's when I started getting really angry about our situation. Not at Mom exactly. I mean, she was trying her best, but just at everything. Why did we have to live like this? Why couldn't we have normal stuff like everyone else? I started doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. Mowing lawns, shoveling snow, whatever I could find. It wasn't much money, but at least I could buy my own school supplies and sometimes even get food when we ran out at home. The worst part about being that poor isn't even the no food or bad apartments or whatever. It's the feeling that you're stuck, that this is just how life is going to be forever. You see other people living normal lives, and it feels like some TV show, not real, not something that could ever happen to you. By the time I hit 17, I was done being poor, like completely done. I started taking every single job I could find, and I mean every job. Gas stations, fast food, unloading trucks, cleaning offices at night. If someone would pay me, I'd do it. This one time, I was literally working 4 jobs at the same time. Morning shift at Burger King, afternoon at this warehouse place, evenings at a gas station, and overnight cleaning offices. I barely slept, but I didn't care. I was making maybe $850 a week total, which was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. Mom thought I was crazy working so much. She kept saying I needed to slow down and enjoy being young. But enjoy what exactly? Being hungry? Having the power cut off? Nah, I was done with all that. One of these jobs was at this local business, a place that sold restaurant supplies. The owner, Greg, was there all the time, like literally from open to close most days. At first, I thought he was just one of those annoying bosses who's always watching everyone, but it wasn't like that at all. I remember this one time I was organizing this storage room way in the back. Nobody ever went back there, and most other employees would just goof off when they got assigned that job. But I was actually organizing everything, making it all neat and efficient. Greg walked in and just stood there watching me for a minute. I thought I was in trouble or something, but he just goes, "You're different from the other kids who work here." Then he starts asking me questions about how I was organizing everything and why I chose to do it that way. We ended up talking for like an hour about inventory systems and efficiency and stuff. It was a weird conversation, but I guess he saw something in me. After that day in the storage room, Greg started teaching me things about the business. Like really teaching me, not just basic employee stuff. He'd show me the books, which looking back was crazy because who shows their financial books to some random 17-year-old employee? He explained how he made purchasing decisions and let me sit in on meetings with suppliers. I found out later that Greg grew up poor too. Maybe not as poor as me, but he definitely knew what it was like to go hungry. I think that's why he took an interest in me. He'd grown his business from literally nothing, started selling supplies out of his garage and built it up over 20 years into this proper company. The other employees used to give me shit about being Greg's favorite. They called me a kiss-ass and whatever else. But I didn't care. For the first time in my life, someone was actually teaching me something useful. School was always whatever, just something you had to do. But this was real stuff I could use. Greg wasn't just teaching me business either. He taught me all this other stuff too, like how to dress for meetings. He even took me to buy my first real suit. He showed me how to talk to important people, even table manners and stuff, because he'd take me to business lunches sometimes. It probably sounds stupid, but when you grow up like I did, nobody teaches you that kind of thing. The biggest thing Greg taught me, though, that it was actually possible to get out. Like really get out of being poor, not just making enough to survive. Before him, I thought the best I could hope for was maybe making enough to get a slightly better apartment and keep the lights on. But Greg showed me there was way more possible than that. I started hanging around after my shifts, asking him questions about everything. He'd answer everything, totally patient, never acted like I was bothering him. The only time I ever saw Greg get mad at me was when I skipped a shift because I was exhausted from working all my other jobs. He sat me down in his office and told me something I'll never forget. He said, "Being poor is exhausting, I get it. But if you want to own a business someday, you can't just work hard, you have to be reliable. If you say you're going to be somewhere, be there." After that, I never missed another shift, even when I was dead tired or sick or whatever. I eventually dropped my other jobs one by one to work more hours at Greg's place. I was making less money overall, but learning way more. I worked at Greg's place for about 3 years, learning everything I could the whole time. I kept thinking about starting my own thing, not copying Greg's business or anything. That would have been messed up after everything he taught me. But I had this idea that wouldn't leave me alone. You guys know those fancy food delivery services now? Like where they bring you ingredients and recipes? Well, this was way before those existed. My idea was basically to do the same thing, but for restaurants, like delivering them all the ingredients they'd need for the next day, all measured out and everything. I noticed working with Greg that a lot of smaller restaurants struggled with inventory and would make emergency supply runs all the time. I spent like 6 months working on a business plan. Greg had taught me how to make one, and he helped me fix it up. He made me really think through everything. Finally, after like 20 revisions of this business plan, Greg says he wants to invest. I couldn't believe it. Like this guy who taught me everything now trusted me enough to put his own money into my idea. It was wild. But here's the thing. Greg didn't just hand me a check. He made me get loans too, said I needed to have skin in the game. Do you know how scary it is to sign for a business loan when you grew up poor? I was literally shaking. All I could think was if this fails, I'm going to be in debt forever. The first few months were a nightmare. We found this tiny warehouse we could afford, basically a big garage with a walk-in fridge. I couldn't hire anyone, so I was doing everything myself. Up at 3 a.m. to start prepping orders, delivering until noon, then making sales calls all afternoon trying to get new customers, and finally doing paperwork until midnight. I'd sleep for a few hours and start the whole cycle over again. We had exactly 3 customers when we started. They only ordered a few things each, probably just feeling sorry for me because I literally begged them to try the service. We lost money every single day for like 6 months straight. There were times I'd sit in that empty warehouse and just want to cry. But slowly, like really slowly, things started working. One customer would tell another. Someone would have an emergency and we'd save their ass with a quick delivery. Word got around that we were reliable. We started getting more orders, then bigger orders. After about a year, we had enough customers to actually hire someone to help with deliveries. I remember the first time I handed someone else the keys to the van. It felt weird letting someone else handle the deliveries because I was so used to doing everything myself. We started expanding to other areas after about 2 years. I opened a second location in the next city over. That was scary too, like starting over, but with more pressure because now I had employees depending on me for their paychecks. But it worked, so we opened another one, then another. Now, 20 years later, we're in like 30 cities. We've got proper warehouses, actual trucks, and hundreds of employees. But I still remember that first tiny warehouse and that crappy van. I keep a picture of it in my office to remind me where we started. Greg passed away a few years back. Cancer. It still hurts to think about. At his funeral, I found out he'd helped a bunch of other people start businesses too. Not all of them made it, but he tried to help anyone who was willing to work hard and learn. I miss him every day. That's when Lucas entered the picture. I've got to tell you about my brother Lucas. He's my half-brother technically. Different dad, also some guy who took off. He's 3 years younger than me. Growing up, we were close, just because we were all each other had besides mom. Lucas was always different from me though, even when we were kids. Where I was always trying to figure out how to make money or improve things, Lucas just kind of existed. It was like he accepted being poor as just how life was going to be. As we got older, the differences got bigger. When I was working all those jobs trying to get ahead, Lucas started hanging out with these guys from the neighborhood. Real losers, if I'm being honest. They'd steal stuff from stores, break into cars, that kind of thing. Nothing major enough to get arrested for, but just enough to make sure they'd never get anywhere in life. I tried talking to him about it so many times. Lucas, you're going to end up in jail. Lucas, come work with me instead. But he'd just laugh it off, said I was too serious, needed to learn how to have fun. Fun? We grew up eating packet noodles for dinner, and he wanted to talk about fun. Back when I started working with Greg, I thought maybe this was my chance to help Lucas turn things around. I still remember bringing him to the warehouse one day. Greg was cool about it, treated Lucas just like he treated me when we first met. He asked him questions about what he wanted to do with his life and offered to teach him the business just like he taught me. You know what Lucas said? He called Greg a stuck-up rich guy trying to play hero. I was so embarrassed. Greg just smiled and said it was fine, but I could tell he was disappointed. Not in Lucas, really. More like disappointed that he couldn't help someone who didn't want help. Later, when my business started doing okay and I was getting ready to open that second location, I tried again with Lucas. I offered him a job handling deliveries. It wasn't some entry-level thing either. Would have been managing the whole delivery system. Good salary, benefits, everything. Greg warned me not to do it, said mixing family and business was asking for trouble, but I was stubborn. I thought I could help my brother make something of himself. Lucas showed up for training exactly one time, and you know what? He was actually good at it. Like really good. He's smart when he wants to be. He picked up the computer system quick, understood the delivery routes, everything. But then payday came around. We pay everyone bi-weekly, right? Normal stuff. Lucas comes to my office all mad because he wasn't getting paid that day. I tried explaining how payroll works, how everyone gets paid on the same schedule, but he wasn't having it. I need money now, he says. I got people waiting on me. I found out later he'd borrowed money from some guys, promised to pay them back with his first paycheck. But he needed the money that day, not in 2 weeks. He never came back after that. Went back to his factory job where he got paid every Friday. That became the pattern. Every couple of years when he'd hit a rough patch, he'd come around asking for work. I'd give him a chance, set him up with something good, and he'd disappear after a few days. Sometimes, he wouldn't even tell me he was quitting, just wouldn't show up. Do you know how that made me look to my other employees? Here's the owner's brother just not showing up for work. No call, no nothing. The last time I tried was about 5 years ago. I had this manager position open at one of our newer locations. Good pay, Easy work, really just keeping track of inventory and managing a small team. I told Lucas he could work his way up from there, maybe even run his own location someday. He actually stuck around for 2 whole weeks that time. Then I find out he's been telling his employees they don't have to follow company procedures, that they can just do things his way. When I tried talking to him about it, he quit. Said I was on a power trip and trying to control everything. After that, I stopped trying to give him jobs. I still helped him out sometimes when he needed money, but no more trying to bring him into the business. It hurt, you know. I'd made it out, built something real, and I wanted so bad to help him do the same thing. But you can't help someone who doesn't want to help themselves. Mom always made excuses for him. He's just finding himself. He's got a different path than you. Not everyone wants to be a businessman. But this wasn't about being a businessman. This was about being a functioning adult. Lucas is 42 years old now and still lives like he's 20, bouncing from job to job. Always one missed paycheck away from being broke. The really messed up part? Lucas resents me for being successful, like somehow me doing well made his life harder. He says I changed after I got money, that I forgot where I came from. How the hell did I forget where I came from when I spent so much time trying to help him get out of there too? Anyway, last week I got a call from Mom asking me to come over to her house. The house I pay for, by the way. $2,900 mortgage every month, never missed a payment. Plus, her car payment, utilities, and I send her like $2,000 extra each month for whatever she needs. I'm just giving you guys the numbers, so you understand I wasn't being cheap with my family or anything. I found out Lucas was living with her again. No surprise there. Every time he can't make rent somewhere, he ends up back at Mom's. But this time, there was someone else there too. Vincent, Mom's new boyfriend. She'd been seeing him for a few months, but hadn't told me about him. I found Vincent sitting in my dad's old recliner. Yeah, I still think of it as Dad's chair, even though the guy was never around. Vincent was sitting there like he owned the place, and the way he was looking at me, all smug, like he knew something I didn't. Mom starts off with the usual stuff about Lucas having a hard time, losing his latest job, struggling to make ends meet. I'm waiting for the part where she asks for money. It's always about money. But then, she hits me with something completely different. She wants me to make Lucas and Vincent partners in my business. I literally laughed because I thought it was a joke, but nobody else was laughing. Vincent starts talking about his business experience. Turns out he owned some phone repair shop like 10 years ago that went bankrupt in less than a year. Real business genius, right? He's going on about all these ideas he has for my company, how he could take it to the next level. Then Mom jumps in, saying how the jobs I offered Lucas before were beneath him, and it was embarrassing for my own brother to work as just a manager. Like, what? I built this company from nothing, spent 20 years growing it, and now they want me to just hand over part ownership because why? Because Lucas is my brother and Vincent's dating my mom? When I said no, Vincent got real weird. Started talking about how unfortunate accidents happen in business all the time, and how my main warehouse was in a rough neighborhood. He wasn't even trying to hide that he was threatening me. Mom just sat there nodding along like this was totally normal conversation. Here's the part that really gets me. Vincent starts listing off details about my business, which locations were most profitable, delivery schedules, even some of my bigger clients' names. Stuff he shouldn't know. Turns out Lucas had been telling him everything he remembered from his brief time working for me. They'd been planning this whole thing, gathering info, waiting for the right time to make their move. I pushed my chair back, ready to leave. All right, this is getting ridiculous. Mom's voice cut through the tension, calm but sharp. Sit down. We're not done here. I shook my head. Actually, I think we are. Her expression didn't change. Either you make them partners, or... She paused just long enough for the weight of her words to settle. Not only will I disown you, but things might get difficult for your business. I froze, staring at her. Are you serious right now? Vincent leaned back in his chair, smirking. Look, accidents happen, you know? It'd be real easy for someone to, I don't know, accidentally damage one of your delivery trucks, maybe even start talking about some food safety concerns. A slow, sick feeling settled in my stomach. My own mother was sitting there while her boyfriend threatened everything I built. And the craziest part? They acted like they were doing me a favor. This will be good for you, Vincent continued. I can help modernize things. I almost laughed. My company already has better tech than anyone in the industry. Mom just smiled like she hadn't just helped threaten me. It'll bring the family together. Oh yeah. By forcing me to give away part of my company? My voice was flat, but I could feel my hands curling into fists under the table. Lucas, who had been silent this whole time, just sat there grinning like he was finally getting what he deserved. I kept my cool somehow, knowing that I would play the game differently. So I told them I'd think about it. The look on Vincent's face, man, he really thought he had me. I called my lawyer the second I got in my car and told him everything. He said we could file for a restraining order based on the threats, but it might be hard to prove since it was just words, and they were careful about how they said things. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything my mom said, trying to figure out how we got here. How did my own mother go from the woman who worked 3 jobs to feed us to someone who sits there while her boyfriend threatens her son's business? I knew I had to act fast. The next morning, I called a meeting with my management team and told them everything about Vincent's threats, about Lucas giving him company info, all of it. These people have been with me for years, some since the early days. They deserve to know what was going on. We spent like 6 hours going through everything Lucas might know about the business. We changed all our security codes, updated delivery routes, switched around some client schedules, and I called our biggest customers personally to warn them they might hear some BS rumors. I got ahead of that whole situation. Then I made some calls to beef up security, added cameras at all locations, hired actual security guards for the main warehouse. It cost me like $55,000 to set everything up, but it was better than risking whatever Vincent might try. I had cameras installed at my house too, plus a new security system. Probably paranoid, but better safe than sorry. Then I called my bank. I stopped all the automatic payments to Mom's accounts, all of them. Mortgage, car payment, utilities, monthly allowance, everything. I didn't tell her I was doing it either. I figured she could find out the hard way, just like she surprised me with Vincent's little threats. My lawyer helped me document everything. I wrote down exactly what was said at that meeting, who was there, what threats were made. I had my management team write statements too, about the security changes we had to make because of the threats. It probably won't hold up in court, but at least there's a paper trail. Then I just waited. I knew it wouldn't take long for Mom to figure out something was wrong. And man, was I right. The texts started coming in about a week later. First from the mortgage company. Payment declined. Then from the car loan people. Then her card started getting declined because I wasn't putting money in her account anymore. She kept trying to call, but I blocked her number. Lucas tried calling from different numbers, but I blocked those too. Vincent actually had the balls to email my company account with some BS about how I was making a big mistake and hurting my mother. I forwarded that straight to my lawyer. More evidence of harassment. The whole time this is happening, I'm dealing with actual business stuff too. I had this big contract negotiation coming up, trying to expand into 2 new cities, plus all the regular day-to-day stuff running a company. You can't just stop everything because your family's trying to pull some wannabe mob movie stuff. About 2 weeks in, my head of security calls me. Says someone tried to get into our main warehouse at like 3 a.m. nothing on the cameras because they ran when the alarm went off. But guess whose car was spotted in the area? Yep, Vincent's. I can't prove it was him trying to break in, but come on. I filed a police report, but they said they couldn't do much without actual evidence. Still, I added it to my growing file of documentation. The really messed up part? Through all this, Mom's still acting like I'm the bad guy. She got one of her friends to message me on Facebook saying I'm killing her by cutting off the money, that she might lose her house, that I'm a terrible son. Like, she literally sat there while her boyfriend threatened to destroy my business, and I'm the bad guy? Some of my other relatives started calling too. They only ever contact me when they need money, but suddenly they're all concerned about Mom. None of them offered to help her pay her bills, though. Funny how that works. They're happy to tell me what I should do with my money, but won't spend any of theirs. About a month after I cut off all the payments, I'm leaving work late one night, and guess who's waiting in the parking lot? Mom and Lucas. At first, I thought maybe they came to apologize, but nope. Lucas looked ready for a fight, and Mom had that look she used to get when she was about to start screaming. Lucas gets in my face right away. He's all skinny and twitchy looking now, probably from all the stuff he's been doing. Found out later he'd gotten into some pretty heavy stuff, which explained a lot. I work out like 4 to 5 times a week, plus I got this thing about always looking professional for business. So we looked like completely different types of people standing there. He starts yelling about how I'm killing Mom, how she's going to be homeless, how I'm choosing money over family. I try walking around him to my car, but he kept getting in my way. Mom's just standing there watching, not even trying to calm him down. Then he tries to grab my laptop bag. Now this bag has my work computer with all kinds of company information on it. After all that stuff with Vincent trying to get company secrets, no way was I letting Lucas anywhere near it. I pull the bag back and tell him to back off. He tries grabbing it again and I push him away. Not hard, just enough to get some space. That's when he tries to punch me, like actually tries to straight up hit me in the face. And since I work out, that didn't go well for him. I blocked it. Those boxing classes finally paid off and pushed him back harder this time. He falls on his butt looking shocked, like he can't believe his little brother actually defended himself. Mom starts screaming like I just killed him or something. She runs over to Lucas, helping him up, asking if he's okay. Meanwhile, I'm standing there with a torn shirt and my laptop bag, thinking about how insane this whole situation is. I told them I'm calling the cops. Lucas starts panicking because he's got warrants out. Found this out later too. He grabbed Mom and they both ran to their car. The whole thing probably looked ridiculous on the security cameras. Two grown men fighting in a parking lot while their mom screams. I filed another police report and added it to the growing pile of documentation my lawyer's keeping. I had to explain to my employees the next day why there might be cops coming around asking questions. That was fun, trying to maintain a professional image while admitting your brother tried to jump you in the parking lot. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. Then I found out last week that Vincent disappeared with what was left in Mom's accounts. Turns out he's done this before. Some people messaged me saying he pulled the same scam with other families. Real piece of work. Lucas showed up at my house last week looking all cleaned up. I almost didn't answer the door, but figured I'd hear what he had to say. Man, what a joke that turned out to be. He started with this whole sob story about being clean now, going to meetings, realizing his mistakes. I actually started feeling bad for him. Then comes the real reason for his visit. He and Mom cooked up this new scheme. They wanted me to loan them money to start their own business. Said they had this amazing opportunity, but needed startup cash. When I asked for details, it was some obvious pyramid scheme thing. They hadn't changed at all, just found a new angle to try getting my money. That was the last straw for me. I told Lucas to get off my property and never come back. He started with the usual guilt trip about Mom losing her house, about family sticking together. I just laughed and went inside. I watched on my security cameras as he kicked my mailbox and drove off. Mom's getting evicted next week. Her friend, the only one who still talks to me, told me. She's been showing people these old pictures of us when we were kids, crying about her ungrateful son who abandoned her. She didn't mention the part where she let her boyfriend threaten me or how she tried scamming me multiple times. You know what's crazy? Ever since I cut them all off, my business is doing better than ever. I signed 3 major contracts last month and we're opening 2 new locations next year. Turns out not having toxic family drama in your life is good for business. Who knew? I got remarried last year. Didn't mention this before because it wasn't relevant. My wife's amazing, comes from a business family, actually understands what it takes to build something. Her parents treat me like their own son. We're expecting our first kid in a few months. That's what real family looks like. People who support each other instead of trying to take advantage. Sometimes I think about that kid I was, growing up in that roach-infested apartment, watching Mom work multiple jobs. I wanted so bad to help her have a better life, and I did. Paid her bills for years, gave her a nice house, sent her money every month. But it was never enough. She and Lucas always wanted more, always felt entitled to everything I built. Mom and Lucas don't know about my new family. They don't know where I live now. Moved to a gated community last year. They don't have my new number or email. My company has strict instructions not to give them any information or let them in any buildings. Sure, sometimes I feel guilty. Those childhood memories are still there. But then I remember how they tried to destroy everything I built, how they conspired with Vincent to steal my business, how they never once apologized for any of it. Just kept coming up with new schemes to get my money. Edit. Thanks for all the support, guys. And no, I'm not telling you what my business is. Learned my lesson about giving family any info about my company, lol. Edit 2. Stop messaging me about helping my mom one last time. Your family might be different, but you don't know mine. Some people never change.